Hi guys, I am recording this at school, so you may hear some noises, maybe some radiators making some thumping noise or people walking outside in the hallway. This is then the next lesson. Basically, I will be with you for this one partially after the quiz, but I won't be able to complete it, so I'm making this video. So in this lesson, we're going to learn about something called the zero product property. Basically, this was taught and introduced to you in the last unit. Hopefully remember that. Hopefully remember how to find the x-intercept from, let's say, a factored form looking like this, right? That's what we're going to do again. So then for the zero product property, what it is basically if you multiply anything by 0, the result always becomes 0. So for example, if you have a times b equals 0, then either a or b has to be 0, right? So for example, if it was 0 times 3, it will be always 0, right? So 2 times 0 is 0, 0 times 10 is 0, so it really doesn't matter whether 0 comes first or later. So this can be used to solve a quadratic equation in a factored form as long as the result or a number on the other side of the equal sign is 0, right? So an example could be x minus 1, x plus 4 equals 0. Then we can actually consider this to be a times b equals 0, where this is the a, this is the b, right? And then we can solve for the x respectively. So solving an equation using a zero product property is basically this. So equate the equation to 0. Okay, if you have some other number, then you have to move it to the other side and factor that again. So be really careful with this, but if you have a 0 on the other side, then you are pretty much set to go. Just factor it. If it is factored, then you're basically safe and just find it. So solve the following quadratic equations in a factored form using zero product property. Basically the same thing. Either this becomes 0 or this becomes 0, right? So then you set up two separate equations that each bracket's equal to 0. So then x equals, in this case, 4, x equals negative 5, since you just have to add 4 to get rid of the 4's, right? Or you subtract 5 to get rid of the 5. So then your solution is these two. So at the end, you can simply say x equals 4 or negative 5. Basically, it means these are the two numbers that satisfy this equation. Okay, so then let's try one more time. And if you have something looking like this, same thing over, right? So then this becomes 0 or this becomes 0. So x plus 2 equals 0 or x plus 1 equals 0. So then subtract 2 to get rid of the 2 and do the same thing on the other side. So then 0 minus 2 becomes negative 2. Or for x plus 1, then we have to subtract 1 from both sides so that the 1's will be gone. So then x equals then negative 1. So your final answer will be then negative 2 or negative 1. Okay. Now I want you to actually try C on your own, see whether you can do this. And if you try this, hopefully you pause the video and then try it. Now I assume that you're going to try this and that you've done it already. So then this equals 0, this equals 0. So x plus 1 equals 0 or x minus 10 equals 0. Then subtract 1 to get rid of the 1's, so then x equals negative 1, or add 10 to get rid of the subtracting of 10, so then x equals then positive 10. Now you may notice that this number is basically the opposite of what's inside of it, but the reason why I'm not telling you to do so is that it does not work all the time, okay? And I'll show you later where it doesn't work. So then the next one is then x times x plus 11. Now you may panic a bit because it doesn't really look the same as this one, correct? The first one had the two brackets, whereas this one doesn't. But think of this way, the reason why we put the brackets around x minus 4 is so that it won't be considered to be x minus 4 times x plus 5, right? It is actually x minus 4 times x plus 5, but if you don't put the brackets around x minus 4, then it becomes x minus and then 4 times x plus 5, right? But in D, we don't really need to put the brackets around the x because x is just itself. So if you are confused because there's no brackets, then put the brackets around the x. So then again, we have the same brackets. So then this has to be equal to 0, this has to be equal to 0. So from the first one, well, x equals 0, we already found what the x is. And the next one is x plus 11 equals 0, so subtract 11, so x will be then negative 11. So in the end, your answer is a 0 or negative 11, right? So same thing with E, and I want you to try this, and I assume that you tried it. Pause the video, try it. So around the x, put the brackets if that confuses you. Now then this equals 0 or this equals 0. Now first one, x is a 0 already for us, so then that's okay. Or x minus 1 equals 0. So add 1 on both sides, so then 1's will be gone, then x equals then 1. So at the end, your answer is a 0 or 1. Now f is slightly weird, right? Because you have square over here, but I don't see any other brackets. So all you can do is, again, make what's inside of the bracket 0. Now you may say, then what about this squared? Now remember, what is 0 squared? That actually is just a 0, right? So it really doesn't matter if we only have one pair of brackets. We just try to make our brackets 0. So then x minus 2 equals 0. Therefore, the x is then positive 2. So in this case, there is only one solution, okay? So same thing goes over here, however, it's slightly different, but basically the same method. So again, it's a squared, right? But we only have one bracket, so make that equal to 0. So then we have 4x minus 3 equals 0, and then solve for this, solve for the x. So add 3, hopefully remember that SAMDAP, right? It's the backwards of the bed mess. So the 3's are gone, then 4x equals 3. So then you have to divide it. I will actually use different color for this so that you will not get confused. So the 4's are gone, then at the end x equals 3 over 4. So this is the only solution for this. So again, all you have to do is just solve what's inside so that it becomes a 0. Okay, solve for the x. So the example like this is slightly different from the previous because we have numbers other than just 1 in front of the x. But it really doesn't matter because then you basically make this one 0, and this one 0. So 4x minus 1 equals 0. So add 1, add 1. So then 4x equals 1. And then you divide it by 4. So then x equals 1 over 4. Or 2x minus 5 equals 0. So add 5, so that the 5's are gone. So 2x then equals 5 divided by 2, so that the 2's will be gone. So x equals then 5 over 2. So then your final answer is x equals 1 over 4 or 5 over 2, right? I'll just put the box around it. So let's then try one more time, and then I actually will ask you to try everything on your own. Same thing over here. This equals 0, this equals 0. I don't care whether this is negative or positive, whether it's a number other than 1 or not. As long as there are brackets and something inside of it, in order for you to solve it, you need to make them 0 so that it becomes a times b equals 0, or 0 times b, or 0 times, or sorry, not 0 times b, or a times 0, so both becomes 0, right? We're using this zero product property. Basically, multiplied anything by 0 is a 0. So find the number that finds, or that results in this first bracket 0. So negative 4x plus 10 equals 0. Subtract 10, subtract 10. So then 10's are gone. Negative 4x minus 10. So negative 4x equals negative 10. Then divided by negative 4. So then the negative 4's are gone. So x equals then negative divided by negative is positive. And then 10 over 4, right? However, this can be reduced to 5 over 2. Same thing over there. So or negative 2x minus 8 equals 0. So add 8 on both sides. So negative 2x then equals 8 divided by negative 2, so that you will only have x at the end. Now 8 divided by negative 2 is basically negative 4. So in the end, your answer is then 5 over 2 or negative 4. Now the reason why I put the final answer separately and I put a box around it is because As you can see, there are quite a lot of steps, and then later on it gets a little more confusing and a little more complicated. And if you do have such cases, then the problem is you actually will confuse yourself what the answer for the x is. And then later on you have to use it, then it becomes a bit of an issue in terms of making mistakes. So that's why I do that at the end, okay? So for J, K, and L, I want you to actually try this on your own. I will make the answer key for these 3 questions and put it up on a Google Classroom, okay? So try these.